So we're just going to wait a few more minutes for everyone to join us. Thank you for coming. Okay, I think we're ready to begin. Happy DNA Day. Are we ready? Let's start. I'm so glad that everyone could join us here today. Today, PBS Books, in collaboration with more than 100 libraries and 9 PBS stations, are thrilled to be here and so thrilled you are here. National DNA Day, what is it? Well, it's actually officially on April 25th, and it raises awareness about the discovery of DNA, which is a discovery found by James Watson and Francis Crick in 1953, a long time ago. But it was based on data by Morris Wilkins and Rosalind Franklin. So they were actually using information from other people. So why are we celebrating it, and what does it mean? Well, we don't just celebrate the discovery. We also are celebrating the completion of the Human Genome Project. I'm sorry about that. In 2003, it provides us an opportunity. Today provides us an opportunity to learn about the latest advances in research and how to explore the advances of DNA and how that might impact our lives. So I'm Heather Marie Montilla. I'm with PBS Books, and I'm the Library Bureau Chief there. Today we have an exciting program for you about DNA and genetics, and we hope we'll celebrate. I've brought along some candy for us to celebrate later. When we're done, we'll play a Kahoot, we'll have a conversation, and we'll even do activities. So let's get started. I'm pleased to introduce an expert, an amazing scientist from the Personal Genetics Education Project at Harvard Medical School, Dr. Nadine. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much, everybody. So happy to be here today. So my name's Nadine. I'm originally from the Netherlands. You might hear my English is not maybe the same, sounds a little different. That's why. So I'm a scientist trained in cell biology and genetics. So, DNA Day is a big thing for me. And I did a lot of my training in Scotland in the UK, and I moved to the US a couple of years ago to study DNA, study chromosomes. So yeah, I'm happy today to answer some of your questions, talk about DNA, talk about what it's like to be a scientist. So let's get going.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Now you've met our scientist. But what would a conversation be with just me and the scientist? Of course, we needed to involve some young people to ask questions. So I'd like to introduce two of our fabulous guests. They're cast members of PBS South Florida's Kid Stew, Satine Sorensen and Nick Rodriguez. Can you share your grade, school, and why you were interested in participating today? Nick, will you start?
Hi, I'm Nick. I am I'm in 8th grade, and also I like to participate in this because I have a segment in Kids Do, which is Kids Do Eels, which actually is based on scientific gross facts that are actually real.
Very cool. Satine, can you share a little bit about yourself?
I'm 14 and I'm in 9th grade, And I wanted to I wanted to participate today because I've always loved science. It's my favorite subject, and I want to know more about DNA. And it's very interesting because that's pretty much what we're made of, and DNA is very important. And yeah, I'm really excited.
Well, we're so excited that you both, well, all of you could join us today. DNA carries genetic instructions in all living things. It makes us who we are, and it determines our characteristics, what color eyes you have, your ears, can you curl your tongue, many different things. So what I thought we could do, since you know a little bit about us, is that together we could play a Kahoot and learn about one another. So if you are ready, how many of you have played a Kahoot before? Great. So we're gonna play a Kahoot. You can either do it online or you can do it with your cell phone, and we're about to start. So I want to go back and just make sure that everyone had an opportunity to see the code, the PIN number. The PIN number in Kahoot, and you would type in www.kahoot.it. The PIN number is 883638. That's 883638. All right. We're going to wait one more minute and see who else can join us, because I know there are a lot of people out there, but not everyone is ready to jump on a Kahoot. So let's see if we can do it. If not, we can always just talk about the results we have. I'm going to say it one more time. It's 883638. Okay. Are we ready to begin again? We're just going to proceed from, you know, if you have dimples, but you might, for the next one, you might need a mirror. Go ahead. Can you curl your tongue? Seems like this is one everyone has figured out how to do. Let's see the next one. Do you have a widow's peak? And that's your first one. interesting. I know I'm learning a lot, but Dr. Nadine might know all of this already. We'll find out from the expert when we're done. Let's keep on going. I've always thought being left-handed was well, we'll discuss this one later. Very interesting. Let's keep on going. Almost done. Let's keep on going. We're going to talk more about characteristics later. So this is for us to know a little bit more about Great. Thank you for your responses, everyone. We're so glad you could join us. So we also wanted to know a little bit so we can tailor our conversation. Thank you. And I believe we have 2 more questions, and this is more to let us know who we're talking to. So just bear with us, and then we're going to jump right into the fun stuff. So that's amazing. We have a lot of people who are experts on this call. So that's a little intimidating for all of us. But let's see if you know the answer to the next question and where you weigh in there too. This is the last one. Well, thank you everyone for participating in our Kahoot. I think that's the end of it. And so now what we're going to do is talk a little bit about some of the results and are they what we expected? Dr. Nadine, can you provide any light on the earlobes attached or not attached? And do we get that from our parents? And is that genetics? Is that DNA? What is that? How does it happen?
Sure. I mean, I won't go into all the detail because I think we have some awesome videos coming up that explain some of these concepts. But what I will definitely say, I saw some here in my Zoom meeting, some confused faces every now and then for like, okay, what does my ear really look like? Or where is my hairline? And that's just to say, like, genetics definitely plays a role, right? And we'll go into it a little bit more in the videos, like DNA builds our body. So for sure, how your earlobe looks or where your hairline is all relates to DNA. But I will say that it's also not as clear cut as we think it is, right? For example, the question on are you left-handed or not for me was tricky because I'm actually ambidextrous. Depending on what I'm doing, I can either use my right or left hand. And for some people, like their earlobes might be really obviously not attached or attached, but for others, it's kind of in the middle. So it's just to say, genetics can be complex, but definitely plays a big role. And let's dive into some more of these things.
That's fantastic. So maybe the best way to start is actually by watching the Gene Explained, the gene-filled donut video. Can we start with that? And maybe that'll be a great way to start our discussion. What do you guys think? Okay.
Can I help you?
Yeah, can I get a donut?
Anything else?
How about a new nose? This one keeps bumping into stuff.
You can't pick your nose.
I'm not picking my nose.
No, I mean, it's your DNA that picks your nose.
Huh?
I'm glad you asked. It's like this.
Oh,
This is a cell.
that looks like a jelly donut.
Inside every cell is a nucleus.
Ooh,
And in every nucleus is your DNA.
looks delicious.
DNA contains thousands of instructions called genes, which are what give your nose its specific shape, color, flavor.
Can I get one of those?
Did you ask how do these genes actually make a nose?
No,
Protein. Your nose is made of protein, like a donut is made of dough.
Oh.
It works like this.
Oh.
A gene sends a message to its cell's factories to produce a protein. But not just any protein. It takes a lot of different kinds of proteins to make a nose. Some proteins make the nose big. Some make it red. Some make it flexible, and some just hold it all together. Genes also tell cells to divide and grow, so that even more of those proteins are made. All that builds up, creating that trademark hunker of yours. And that's how your DNA picks your nose. And all the other parts of your body. Any questions?
Can I please just get a donut?
Oh, sorry. We're out.
Well, great. So my nose is from genetics. I think, I don't know, Dr. Nadine, what was the real takeaway? And then I actually think, Nick and Satine, do you guys have questions? Does one of you want to jump in before Dr. Nadine starts? Who wants to start?
I'll start.
Nick, go ahead.
Well, my first question is, can one parent have stronger DNA than another?
By stronger DNA, what do you mean? Can you?
Like, can I have more DNA that's stronger that could produce like more for their child?
I think I understand what you're trying to say. Like, why is it? Might it be like, why do you have a trait in common with your dad, but you don't? There's not the same trait as your mom. For example, you have the eye color of your dad, but not your mom. Is that kind of what you're going for? Like,
Yeah.
why can I see that, but not my mom's?
Yeah, that you can have possibly more than another. Like more
Right.
DNA from your father than your mother.
So you actually get equal amounts of DNA from each of your parents. It's just how those traits express is a whole complex way of different genes working together. I wouldn't say one of them is stronger than the other, because very often the word strong sometimes sounds like better. That's not at all what's
Yeah.
happening, but it's really just how traits come together and mix that then express in this very specific way. Right, so if you think of eye color, actually our eye color, there's a lot of genes that determine what color our eyes have. Right, it was one of our Kahoot problems, or one question's not a problem. And so really eye color depends on how much darker pigment you have. The more darker pigment you have, the more dark your eyes are. The less of the pigment you have, the lighter they are. So depending on which genes you got from your parents, like if one parent gives you a lot of, like, let's say brown dye, you're going to have more darker colored eyes. And if another parent doesn't contribute that, your eyes are going to be lighter. And so it's really a mix of a lot of different factors.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. Is there a connection between proteins in the DNA and the proteins coming from our food?
Very good question. I mean, the main thing that this video did is I don't want a donut. That's really what I'm wanting right now. That's a really interesting way to use a donut as an example. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like the proteins that make us are basically the same as the proteins that make a donut. The code of life, DNA, is found in any organism, any living thing on this planet. And so we use the same code to make very similar proteins. It's just the way those proteins are put together causes the variety that we see around us, between how you and I look to our pets, to the birds in the sky, like similar building blocks, but they're just put together slightly differently.
Oh, interesting.
I think we're going to take a minute and make sure we all have the same basis of understanding by watching a quick little video produced out of the UNC TV PBS station. It's Gene 101.
In the genetic organization of your instruction manual, genes play a huge part. Genes are stretches of DNA. They can be long or short or somewhere in between, but all genes have a beginning, an end, and form a complete sentence, so to speak. And what do those sentences say? Well, genes are instructions on how to build proteins. Proteins are the physical worker bits that do all the heavy lifting in your cells. They are both the builders and the building blocks, the janitors, the operators, the emergency response team, and much more. Bottom line, they are super important. And beyond building proteins, genes also contain the instructions of when, how, and how much of a protein to make. Different creatures have different genes, of course, but lots of our genes are similar. You and a chicken have similar basic structures. Similar organs made out of similar tissues, made out of similar cells, made out of similar proteins. In fact, you and a chicken are 60% identical, genetically speaking. And when it comes to the genetic code of humans, we are all more than 99% identical. So even though we may look different, the code that we are built with, our genes, are more similar than they may seem.
Well, that's super interesting. I never knew I was 60% similar to a chicken. And I think that was my biggest takeaway. No, it's interesting also, as we live in this very unique time with the pandemic, to realize part of the reason why everything is affecting everyone around the world is we are 99% similar. Is that right, Dr. Nadine? Is that why we're all affected? We're so similar to one another around the whole globe?
Yeah, we're very similar to each other. So once a virus finds a way to infect us, it basically finds a way to infect all of us. It just needs to find that key to get in, and this virus managed to do that, unfortunately for us, pretty successfully. And that's how it's basically, without bias, seems to affect everybody around the world.
Nick or Satine, is there anything you'd like to share before we jump into the next quick little video? Any question you might have about that?
I have one last question for this video. Is there any way scientists can alter a person's DNA before they're born?
That's a really good question. I get that question a lot. You might have heard of something called CRISPR. Have you heard that term flying around
No.
The media likes to use it? No. Okay, good thing. I'll explain to you. So CRISPR has got really popular because it can do exactly that. It's a tool where we can make changes to DNA quite effectively, right? And that's brought a lot of hope for a lot of people that might suffer from genetic conditions, where it's like, okay, now we can maybe very precisely go to the DNA and make changes to the code so you no longer suffer from that condition. Now, to your specific question, if you can do that before somebody's born, we're now at a stage where we technically can do it, but as the international scientific community, they've put something called a moratorium. It's a really fancy way of saying a pause. Of like, okay, we can do it, but let's first have conversation about, do we want to do it? Do we want to start changing our code, something that's so unique to ourselves? What if we make mistakes? What if there's things that we didn't predict before? Genetics is very complex. We might not have a good enough understanding to just start making changes, and then what if we make things worse instead of better? So it's a hopeful technology, but we're still at a stage where we're kind of trying to figure out like what's the best way to use it and move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have another question. How can doctors determine if you have a patient, like an unborn baby or newborn baby, has a words, predisposition to the COVID-19 disease through their DNA?
Oh, good question. So in general, when it comes to determining if you're predisposed to something, what we can do is we can read people's codes, right? So this is what the Human Genome Project that was mentioned really at the start, what it made possible, so that we can now read somebody's code. And so that used to take, the first time they read somebody's code, it took 13 years and like, I don't know, like $3 billion to do it. Now they can do it within a day for, I think it's now $1,000. So it's still expensive, but you know, nothing compared to the 3 billion originally was. And so we can read people's codes and learn like if you're predisposed, very good word, if you're at higher risk of something, some disease. When it comes to COVID-19 specifically, that's still so new to us. I mean, we just aren't there yet to really know if there are certain genetic codes that might put you at higher risk or not, but that's something people are definitely researching and we might hear more about in the next months. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. I think, Dr. Nadine, after that great explanation, I want to jump into another short video from UNC PBS, UNC TV PBS. And this one is a little bit more about DNA to give us more information.
Life is complicated. There are a ton of different parts doing a ton of different things. But those parts and things are all referencing a set of instructions that are unique to each organism. And those instructions are DNA. This little helix is a super special molecule that's found in the nucleus of every cell in a living organism. From the more complicated to the less complicated. DNA is a long coiled set of basic letters that when organized into sentences and chapters make the instruction manual for an organism. All by itself, the DNA doesn't do much, but when chemicals and proteins in the cell read the DNA, they can tell other chemicals and proteins how to build whatever parts need building. And those parts that come by the millions are the building blocks that make the cells, tissues, and organs of each living thing. You've got to admit, that's a lot of potential for a single molecule.
Wow. Really short, but really powerful. Is there anything else is there ways you could highlight that video to help us better understand what we just learned in such a short amount of time?
Sure. I mean, I think all these videos try to give different ways to think about how DNA works, which I always like to hear the same story in different ways, helps me understand things. And it's really about like DNA, like I said, it's kind of like, they call it an instruction manual. I always like to use the term a recipe book. Because the one thing I do want to add to what isn't really in the videos too much is that environment also plays a huge role in how we look and how we behave and things like that. Like even the guy with the nose in the first video, you know, his nose has a certain shape because of genetics for sure, but let's imagine he was like an American football player and got punched in the nose at some point. His nose is going to have a different shape, and that's not necessarily genetics, that's the environment acting there, right? And the same is true for, you know, you're all in school, you might be worried about your grades or how well you're doing at school. There might be some genetics there. We actually have very little knowledge about it. Intelligence is a hugely complicated thing. But a big part to how well you do in school is how good your teacher is at teaching you a topic, or do you have access to maybe a tutor that can help you out, or an older brother or sister that might know a lot about this topic. You know, your environment plays a big role, and I just wanted to highlight that as well. They both kind of work together to make us who we are.
So it's the nature versus nurture conversation. And what about good genes that go bad? We actually have a video on that. Why don't we share that, and then we can jump into that conversation.
Sounds good.
Welcome to Livertown, a beautiful suburb nestled in the greater Body metropolitan area. Here, each and every one of the 240 billion liver cells constantly work to keep their town healthy. Work that is supervised by the Genetic Planning Authority and its 2 construction crews. The Go crew starts growth so the city can thrive, and the Stop crew stops growth so there's not overcrowding. It is, all in all, a well-run system. Oh, no! It looks like there's trouble starting over there on lot 73A. Let's take a closer look to see what's going wrong. When it's time for a cell to grow, the Go crew gets to work. Oh, but if the instructions are damaged, they don't know when to stop. The cell grows out of control, and we could be watching the beginnings of cancer. I know. So, how do instructions get damaged? Well, before it divides, each cell must carefully copy its DNA to pass to its daughter cell. Usually, the cell makes an accurate copy. But when 6 billion base pairs must be copied quickly, there's bound to be a few mistakes that slip through. And bang! A mutation. That's not the only way mutations can occur. Some happen from radiation, like sunlight or toxins, like cigarette smoke. Some mutations we inherit, and some happen when the stop crew is broken. And a damaged cell keeps splitting into more damaged cells, crowding neighbors, stealing resources, and making this once beautiful town a dangerous place. So how do we fix all this? Well, one way is chemotherapy. But that's like a nuclear strike that kills not only the bad cells, but a lot of the good cells, too. A more strategic method is to read the broken DNA of a bad cell to determine a treatment that will only remove that cell. So clever. Another is to read the whole body's genetic makeup to keep a lookout for any likely cancers. And treat it before any harm to this lovely, peaceful little town.
So what did you think? Any questions? Nick, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. My first question is, what is the most common way cells get damaged besides smoking?
Very good questions. Yeah, smoking was one that was mentioned in the video. There's a lot of toxins like that can cause cell damage. Another common one is UV light. So this is why, when your parents say wear sunscreen, there's a good reason why to tell you that, because UV light can be very damaging to your cells and to your DNA specifically. Another source, have you ever been to the dentist and they did like an x-ray of your teeth?
Yes.
Right, and they give you like this kind of
Like a
heavy
vest.
cloth to protect you. Yes, because that kind of radiation can also cause damage to your cells. Now, not to scare you, like if you go to a dentist and you get that done every once in a while, like the dose is pretty low, like you're not exposed to that much. And your cells actually have ways to fix a lot of those mistakes that might be made and damage that gets caused. But if you're like constantly exposed to it, that can cause some problems. This is why your dentist very often like leaves the room, because if they're doing that to multiple people every day, they actually get exposed to a much higher dose, and that can be a bit more dangerous. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Satine, do you have a question?
Yeah. This is like the cancer side. When they were talking about the cancer, when was the first time that doctors discovered the disease and called it cancer?
Oh gosh, I actually don't have an answer for you on that one. I don't know the history of when the first time it was they discovered cancer. I mean, it's one of those things that they probably had some idea, because the one thing with cancer is that cancer grows really fast, right? There's cells that grow really fast. So you might have heard this, you get like lumps, because there's like all of a sudden a lot of cells. So I can imagine people have noticed that for a very long time, that people all of a sudden have these like, maybe a bulge on their arm, but whether they knew that it was cancer, that's probably a much more recent kind of, and when that name came into play, actually, now you ask, I want to go research, but I'll stay here just for, for this, but it's a really good question.
We actually had a question that came in from one of the participants asking about, do DNA instructions ever make mistakes, and what happens when they do?
That's a good question. So I can answer that in a variety of ways. So one key concept, like one of the things we saw in the video, like cells divide, right? To maintain your tissues, like your skin cells are always growing because, you know, they're exposed to the weather. Some of them disappear, so you want to keep growing them. So as they divide, every time they divide, each cell needs a copy of your DNA. So it needs to copy the code and then give one to each cell. And when it's copying, it can make mistakes. I mean, imagine that you're trying to write a book with 3 billion letters in it. Would you not make a mistake at some point? You probably would, right? It's all A's and C's and T's and G's, 3 billion of them. It's quite a lot. So mistakes like that can happen. And like I said, fortunately, our cells are pretty good at finding those mistakes. So they do like a quick check before they really divide. And sometimes when it comes to mistakes in the code or like variants that can cause cancer, you can inherit them. They can be in the DNA. You could inherit them across generations. And those can be a bit more tricky to deal with. But those are like the things when you were asking earlier, Satine, about people being predisposed to a disease, that's how we would find that. Like you might have a certain combination of letters in your code where we know like, oh, that puts you at a bit of a higher risk of cancer. It doesn't guarantee it, but you should be maybe a bit more careful about smoking or being exposed to things that might trigger the cancer.
Do either of you have any other questions before we jump into our very last video?
I have one more actually. This one is, what are some ways doctors can test to find some damaged cells?
Good question. So again, I'm not a medical expert, but I'll try and share what I do know. So there's a variety of things. Like first of all, people that might get diagnosed with cancer very often because they show symptoms that trigger doctors to think, oh, there might be something happening, right? People might be very tired. Depending on where the cancer is happening, if it's a skin cancer, you might show, I don't know if you can see this on camera actually. My light's pretty bad, but I have a lot of these like moles and stuff. Most of them are fine. I get checked every year to make sure. But that's, for example, if you all of a sudden have bigger ones, that might be a sign of like, oh, something's growing really fast there. That might be an issue. So there's just like symptoms like that that can trigger a doctor. To really diagnose you, they could take a biopsy. So they've once removed one of my moles, and you can see under a microscope, those cells look a little different. Like in the animation, they made them like green. I wouldn't say that happens, but there are definitely signs that you can see under a microscope that the cell is not behaving the way it should. We can read out the genome of the cell, of that specific cell, and see if there's big changes or big rearrangements that happen that might trigger us. There's actually a lot of cancer cells put chemicals out into your bloodstream, so we can take a blood sample and read from there. So there's really a whole arsenal of tools that can be used to see what's going on.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I have another question. How accurate is DNA testing?
Oh, good question. What is there something specific you're thinking of?
I guess how can you like how real is it? Like is it can you see that someone has something wrong in their DNA like right away, or does it take time? I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, I see what you're saying. It really depends on what you're looking for. If it's something like a very well-studied condition, we might know exactly what we're looking for, and that makes it a lot easier, right? Because then rather than having to read your entire DNA, we can just read that very tiny bit where we know what change to expect or what letters to expect that can clue us on. If it's something like cancer, which is actually, it's really tricky with cancer because we think of it as one disease, right? Because we use the word cancer, so it sounds like it's one thing, when it's actually thousands of different diseases.
Yeah.
They all do the same thing. They cause your cells to start multiplying really fast, but there's really 1,000 different ways in which that can start happening. And so sometimes we have to read somebody's entire DNA and try and start figuring out like, where was there a change? Could that explain what's happening? So then it takes a bit more time to work out what's going on.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
I couldn't have asked for a better introduction to our very last video. So thank you both for all of those questions that lead into the gene strike. I hope we can share that now.
They're calling in a chemo strike.
It's about time. That'll stop it.
But sir, a chemo attack will destroy the whole town.
The tumor has grown too big. We can't stop it. Chemo is our only chance of survival.
Wait a second. They're holding the chemo. Too much collateral damage. They're sending in a precision strike team to do recon.
Recon? There's no time. Chemo it now.
Sir, we have better technology now. Okay, we can get in behind enemy lines, decode the genes, and learn how it is attacking.
I've lost a lot of cells. A lot of good cells. Fighting this cancer. I can't lose another.
Well, chemo might kill it, but it will definitely kill more cells, making it hard to fight again if the cancer comes back or if other enemies invade.
I won't lose another one. Not one more cell. Brief me on this strike team. How does it work?
One of our doctors sneaks into the tumor, nabs some DNA, and learns all the cancer's secrets. Well, different cancers have different vulnerabilities. So once the doctor hones in on the enemy's weak spot, a strike team is sent in, quietly, cleanly, and with no collateral damage.
A precision strike.
A precision strike. And it's not just about finding the enemy's weaknesses. Doctors can also look at a patient's genes to gather intelligence about the strengths of the troops.
Well, then brief me.
Okay, situation cancer advancing. Now, instead of just sending out troops in a pill and hoping that it works, the doctor can do some recon to the patient's genes.
Yeah.
And see exactly what kind of troops will work best with the patient's genes to make sure they are using the best tactics.
Well, why didn't we use this in the Great Respiratory War?
We just weren't there yet.
Well, let's get ready for the precision strike. Comms, put in a call to the president.
Super interesting. What do you guys think? Nick or Satine, do you have a question for Dr. Nadine?
Yes, my first question is, when was chemo first discovered?
Good question. So chemotherapy means, it's two words, right? It's chemo, which is chemical therapy. So it's really a variety of different chemicals that people use, and depending on which cancer you have, they'll try and find what they think would work best for you. But it really, where it first was discovered is actually in the start of the 20th century. So we're talking like the First World War. They actually use something like, you might have heard of mustard gas, if you've ever had this in history classes.
Yeah.
Right. So this was actually a chemical weapon, right? We're talking, so actually when they make this analogy with like being at war and the nuclear bomb in these videos, it kind of, that's where it came from. They were using it as to fight people, to hurt people. But one thing they found is that people that were exposed to this mustard gas, their white blood cells, there were fewer of them. And so they researched this more and more and more. And what they found out is that actually what happens when you, well, in this case, they attack people, but let's now move towards treating people with these type of chemicals, is that what they're trying to do is to stop cells from dividing, right? Because cancer is basically cell division gone out of control. So if you can stop that, you can hopefully stop the tumor from growing much further and maybe even shrink it. But the problem is there's other cells in your body that are dividing, cells that you actually need, like your white blood cells, what they found in these soldiers. And that's why chemotherapy is such a harsh treatment, because sure, it acts on your cancer, but also acts on a lot of your other cells that you actually need. Good question.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. Why does chemo kill both good and bad cells?
Good question. So yeah, it's because it attacks cells that are dividing to stop cell division, which is great for stopping your cancer, which is this out of control cell division. But you also have other cells that need to divide every now and then. I mean, one of the most common symptoms of people that use chemotherapy is they lose their hair, right? You might have seen this in patients, right? And this is because your hair is something that's actively growing. These are cells that are dividing that grow your hair. So if you use chemotherapy, you also stop those cells from dividing. So you lose your hair. Your immune system are cells that are actively dividing. So if you use chemo, those cells will stop working. And that actually can be very dangerous for a patient who is, dealing with cancer, can now be much more susceptible to a lot of other diseases because their immune system is affected. Yeah.
What other questions might some of our audience members have? If you can write in your questions, and we'll also ask them as well. I actually have one question, and one question is from from someone who's asking about the lead apron that is put on people at the dentist. And it goes into sometimes dependent on age. She was informed that you don't need it when you hit 40 or when you get older. And I wanted to know if anyone, doctor, if you've heard anything about that. I am over 40 and I still always get it at the dentist, but I thought maybe you could answer that or provide some insight into the importance of it or why maybe they don't use it.
I've actually never heard of that you wouldn't use it anymore. And I would, even though it's a small dose, I think it's always good to take the precaution. I don't think you're going to be in a lot of harm if you don't use it, but because like I said, you do it every now and then, but why not wear it, right? It's not really in your way that much. The only thing I could think of why there might be some conversation about age-related thing, and I don't know if that's, again, a dentist or maybe something else. So a lot of caveats here, I'm kind of guessing, but the one thing that I can think of is that people before the age of 40 might be thinking of having kids. And so one of our cell types that we really protect, our bodies do a very good job at it, but we might want to think of ourselves as our reproductive cells, right? Our eggs and our sperm cell. We might want to make sure the DNA in there stays as protected as possible so that when you have kids, they don't maybe carry any of variants that can cause disease. So there I can maybe see that for certain things, they're like, okay, up until you're at the age that you want to have kids, let's make sure we extra protect that. But when you're after that, maybe they are a bit more lenient, but that's purely me just guessing at this point.
Thank you. Nick or Satine, do you have another question?
Yes, I do. Are there alternative methods to fighting cancer than chemo?
Yes, so actually that is kind of what the video is trying to get at. Now that we've learned so much more about people's DNA, and this is like really a recent thing when I think about it, like the first time we read somebody's genome, a human's genome, was in 2003. It's really not that long ago. And so we're still learning a lot, but now that we can read people's DNA and a lot of other, like even their proteins, we can look at proteins and see like, is there something happening there? We can now have much more targeted ways of treating cancer, right? That's what they were trying to say with this like precision strike. It's like rather than just stopping all cell division in every one of your cells, like let's see like what is specific about this tumor that we can now target a medicine to, and hopefully just target the tumor, get rid of the tumor rather than causing a lot of other problems in somebody's body.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I have a final question. Since cancer has been like here for like a while, we've known about it longer than other diseases. Why are we not able to like find a cure for it?
Yeah, I mean, this is a question I get all the time, and I fully understand the frustration, right? Because we probably all know people that are suffering from it, and so, the sooner we can get a solution, the better. And that really comes down to the fact that, so when we think of cancer, we very often see it as a disease, when actually it's thousands of different diseases. And because of that, it's so different. You're not going to find a single cure that's going to work for everybody. And this is why now having precision medicine, being able to read people's DNA and see what actually might precisely be going on in that patient, gives us so much more powerful tools to start treating all these different types of cancer. And so actually there's been a lot of progress. I know it might not feel like it because we still hear so many people passing away, unfortunately, but for sure there's for a lot of cancers, the prognosis is so much better than it was 10 years ago. And we're moving towards, and now, with having DNA is a very powerful tool for us to kind of be much more precise and hopefully help out a lot more people than we were able to.
Nice. Thank you.
I actually received two other questions from participants. One is, who determines whether you use chemo or radiation? And a secondary one is, if you know how many cancers can actually be treated with the strike method.
So I'm not a medical doctor. I actually do not know why you would make the decision between chemo and radiation. They do different things. And so I think chemo is really about stopping cell division. Radiation is mainly about causing so much damage to a cell that it hopefully will just kill it. And with both of those methods, you're dealing with, if I put radiation I don't know, I have a mole and I put radiation on it hoping to kill those cancer cells, I'm also going to again hurt cells around it that are there. Why you would choose one method over the other, I don't have an answer for, but hopefully if you Google it, you can find some more, but I hope it at least gives you some idea of the difference and why there might be different ways of using it. The second question was about, sorry.
That's okay. I'm sorry. It's
Oh,
about
if you could have precision medicine for all different types of cancer, right?
Mhm.
So I would say there again, okay, there we go. We broke up for a second. So there again, it really depends. Some cancers we know a lot about. We've been able to discover where the problem lies, and we now have tailored medication. Others were still in the research process. Very often, the more patients you have with a specific type of cancer, the easier it is to find the data, to get the numbers, to really figure out what might be going on there. And then another big part of it, which is unfortunate, but it's reality, is just funding. Money in research, right? You need to have the funds to be able to do that research and to be able to hire staff to do it, to have all the equipment. And so it really depends on, like, it sounds so bad, but it's almost like, is your cancer popular enough that people are willing to fund it and research it, right? That's what they sometimes think of. Rare diseases don't get as much funding because, you know, if you develop a drug for that, there's not going to be as many patients, so companies might not be interested in doing that. And that's also something to keep in mind with this precision medicine. It's opened so many possibilities, but I also want to be careful in saying that we're still at a stage where a lot of that can be quite expensive. So not all patients will have access to that. And so sometimes chemotherapy is just a thing that they can afford, right? And so we're trying to work really hard and getting those costs down and making sure that more and more people can benefit from these treatments.
That's a really great answer. Thank you. I have one other question, and then I'd love to hear a little bit more about your science experience and exactly what you do as a researcher. The question also came in from our participant, and the question is, how do you trace DNA to a specific part of a country? So I think they're referring to the DNA tests that are the home tests, and you learn, you know, where you're from, where your ancestors are from. Do you have any experience on that? And can you provide any insight how they're able to, once you do that DNA test, to say, oh, you're from here and there, et cetera? Any?
Yeah, I can try and give a little bit of insight. These things are pretty complex, so let's see if I can get it into like a little bite-sized explanation. And so, like, yeah, we saw in the video, right? Humans are like over 99% identical, so that's always confusing. Like, then can you tell me where my ancestry lies? Because that's what they're doing, right? They're saying like, okay, your ancestors were more likely from this geographical region or this continent, or sometimes they use countries as kind of a way to do that. So what they're really looking at is like less than 1% of your DNA, a really tiny bit where some variation is found. And that variation explains why, for example, us here talking in our Zoom meeting or everybody at home, we don't look identical to each other, right? That's all in that really tiny percentage. And then an even smaller percentage of that tiny percentage can help us see where somebody's ancestry might be. And now, to put a whole long story, try and keep it short, what they're really doing here is to kind of give you a likelihood of where you're from. So they say like, oh, you have this specific DNA code. Well, actually, a lot of people in Europe have that same code. Some people in Africa have that code. Some people in Asia have that code. So then they say, well, most people that have that code are found in Europe, so we're going to guess you have it because you're from Europe, right? Even though it's found in other populations very often, it's kind of like if you do that for thousands or hundreds of thousands of little codes in your DNA, you're able to kind of give a most likely guess of where your ancestry lies. So that's really in a nutshell, kind of trying to summarize what it is, but I hope that helps a little.
That really does help. Thank you. Okay. Before we move on, and just we'd like to hear a little bit about your science background and what you do as a researcher or a scientist on DNA Day. I just want to make sure that Nick and Satine, that all of your questions have been answered. I know you had a lot of them, and we're so thrilled you've been here with us. Dr. Nadine, can you share with us, why did you decide to be a scientist, and what do you do from day to day?
Sure. Oh gosh. So yeah, I've always been interested in puzzles. That's really where it comes from. And I still am. Like, my husband can tell you, that's what I've spent my free time doing, is all different types of puzzles. And so throughout high school and middle school, high school, I've always taken interest in a lot of different things. Because for me, puzzles is not just science, right? Like there's a lot of social science. I love languages for that same reason, like just trying to understand different languages and what happens there. And it wasn't really until I got to college and I took different classes in different fields that I really found that I really like biology. So yeah, nobody should feel pressure that they have to know right now what they want to do later in life. For me, it kind of just happened. I realized I like very analytical stuff, so I did a lot of math in school. And then basically I just bumped into some people that were alumni from my university that were doing research, and I thought, well, that's pretty cool, right? Now it's a really big puzzle. There's no answer key. Nobody knows what really is happening or what's going on. And so it's really excited for me to work on those type of puzzles where there is no answer and it's up to you to find the answer, which comes with a decent amount of being okay with failing, because you're going to fail a lot when you do research, and that's okay. That's how we figure out stuff. You try something, you think you might have an answer, you test that answer, and it might not be true. But the times that it's true is really exciting, and you can really make a change in the world by doing that. And so that's what really drew me into research. Like I said, I worked in the UK for quite a long time. I lived there for 6 years, and then I moved here to Harvard to do even more research. And so maybe a little bit about what I researched. So during my PhD work, when I was in the UK, I looked at cell division. So, what we just talked about is very close to my heart. What I work in is called basic research. So that's not about developing drugs or developing medication, but it's really about just understanding how things work. Like if we want to understand what goes wrong in, for example, a cancer cell, we first need to understand how it normally works. Like what does a healthy cell do and look like, for us to really understand by comparison then what's going wrong in a cancer cell. So that's kind of always been my field, is basic research. When I moved here to Harvard, I was really interested in like, how does all that DNA fit into a tiny little cell? Like if I would take your DNA code and I would stretch it out, it's actually 6 feet long. So that needs to all like fold up and get into these tiny cells and still be active enough and open enough that the cell can use the instructions, right? So that's that conundrum of like, how does it do that? And so yeah, now day-to-day work has been a little different for a year now, because I've moved more into these kinds of conversations and doing outreach. A big part of it is because I realized things that I was doing in the lab, they're so important for people to know about. And I really want to share that, my excitement for it. So I'm always happy that I can come on and just talk with people and share just my experience in research, but also just science in general. So yeah, thank you so much for having me today.
We are so thrilled that you came, Dr. Nadine, and we're so thrilled everyone was here, that all of you were here with us. I did promise to do some origami, and what I'm going to do actually, because basically you have to print out something from a website and they give you instructions, and then you end up with something like this that you fold, and at the end you have a fabulous string of DNA. When we end this call, I'm actually going to insert the link that you can download that from the website directly from Facebook. And so you'll be able to use that and just be able to build at home. I strongly encourage all of you to watch the little video below where the template is, because it makes it so much easier. And that actually is on the www.genome.gov website, and it's DNA origami. So it's a lot of fun, and then you can have it, but watch the YouTube video that they have right for you. So without further ado, I have lots of people to thank, because today would not be possible without obviously the 3 amazing people who joined me today, and then also Zachary Allen, who did all of my switching and made that possible. And then there are, really so many people who helped to make this possible. And rather than going through everyone one by one, and they are all so very amazing, we've put together a quick little presentation to close up this event. So thank you for tuning in. We hope to see you again. I can't thank you enough, Dr. Nadine, Satine, and Nick, for joining us from South Florida PBS South Florida, and Kids Stew. It's really been a pleasure, and we look forward to doing this again with more than 100 libraries. You guys have been amazing, and all of those stations as well. So without further ado, here are our thank yous. For more videos like the ones you've seen, just go on PBS Learning Media and look up the Gene Explained, or the next slide, you can also look up Life's instruction manuals. Thank you to all of our wonderful library partners. We couldn't have done this without you, and we hope that you enjoyed today's show.